Hi everyone! I wanted to quickly remind you that April is Autism Acceptance Month, and shout out the Autism Self-Advocacy Network for those who hate the ableism of Autism Speaks, but who still want to support neurodiversity. And on with the review.
The All-American Prophet, he found a brand new book about Jesus Christ. We're following him to paradise. We call ourselves Mormon, and our new religion is All-American.
My Five Wives is a 2000 comedy starring the late Rodney Dangerfield, about a lust-filled, sexist, middle-aged man moving to a pseudo-Mormon community and becoming a polygamist, only learning to respect women when he can see what they can do for him as his brides.
I'll tell you the best part about having 3 wives. I mean, they all can't have a headache.
Similar to The Last Man on Planet Earth, it's got such a shallow, mean-spirited depiction of feminism, an objectifying view of women, and crass homophobia that you'd swear it was made in the 1960s. I actually thought it was, at first. I thought it was cringeworthy, but slightly progressive given that it came out in the 1960s. When I found out that it was made in the year of our spaghetti monster 2000, I lost what piddling respect I had for this movie. Now I've got no respect.
No respect at all, are you kidding?
The film was written by Rodney Dangerfield and fellow stand-up comic Harry Basil, and directed by usually good director Sidney J. Furie, who I'm pretty sure was just phoning in his direction. The producer, John Curtis, has a history of low-budget crass films. I blame all of them for this sexist trash, and wouldn't be surprised if their names come up in any future Me Too scandals. The plot starts with Monty Peterson, played by Rodney Dangerfield, delivering exposition in the form of bad stand-up, a hallmark of Rodney Dangerfield authored productions.
I'm smart. Well, when I was paper trained, I learned to read.
Yeah, I know that stand-up is his shtick, but that doesn't mean it makes for good movie entertainment. More than just being subpar and annoying, it violates the film storytelling rule of show don't tell. We go to a film to watch a story, not listen to narration. What Caddyshack gets right is making his stand-up about him interacting with other characters. His rambling about how ugly a hat isn't supposed to be funny in itself. The movie doesn't put itself on hold to listen to the stand-up routine about a hat. It's funny because Judge Smales is wearing the hat and gets embarrassed, furthering the plotline about these two characters clashing. That's why you get film comedians to write stand-up comics lines in the film medium. Monty, or rather Rodney Dangerfield, because that's the only way we're gonna think of him, is a rich land developer. That's really all you need to know about him. His whole backstory doesn't really mean anything. It's just stand-up junk. He proceeds to make a transphobic joke.
Gorgeous women, handsome men. The trouble is, you can't tell which is which.
It's not even a good joke. It just takes transphobia as a given and throws it out there in the middle of bad stand-up. Rodney gets a ride to divorce court by an attractive woman that he apparently hired to be his driver. It's a little unclear. All they did to indicate who she is to give her a funny hat.
Well, you buy a hat like this, I'll bet you get a free bowl of soup, huh?
It doesn't stop him from sexually harassing her. They explicitly call it sexual harassment. It just leads to more bad stand-up, and nobody really cares that he just agreed that he was sexually harassing her. Unlike Caddyshack using both lead-ins to stand-up, and having the stand-up be used as lead-ins for other scenes, and having his comedy actually be used to create tension with other characters, My Five Wives takes the Rodney Dangerfield approach of just having the characters be stand-ins for the audience of one of the stand-up acts, giving him lead-ins and then just standing there and appreciating his comedy. The movie is put on hold for a stand-up routine. You know, Joss Whedon has a lot of self-insert characters who crack jokes like he would, but it works because they're characters in the scenes, on the same level as other characters, not just vehicles for his stand-up routines. There's even a joke in an episode of Buffy about how Giles laughing at Xander's joke is just Giles trying too hard to be likable. So, Rodney Dangerfield is getting a divorce to his third wife. His soon-to-be ex-wife brings in his previous 2 ex-wives as character witnesses. And all he can do is deliver a bad stand-up routine about the bad sex he had with them and how they married him for his money. Hypocritically, he expected romantic affection from his ex-wives, but seems to have only valued them for what they could do for him, not as romantic partners. There is nothing about a romantic relationship that went south, just sex jokes and whining about gold diggers. Because sex and money seems to be what Rodney Dangerfield thinks that marriage is all about. Both Rodney Dangerfields. Okay, his lawyer is a woman. That's slightly feminist. That's scraping the bottom of the barrel for feminist content, but it is there. Unfortunately, she's the kind of lawyer who doesn't care about sexual harassment and laughs at bad stand-up about it. The use of misogyny early on could be used to feminist effect if there's any kind of journey where he sees the error of his ways and improves, but aside from a very non-committal nod to women bettering themselves, that's really just a device to restore the status quo, there's nothing like that. He's just a sexist character in a sexist narrative, and we're supposed to laugh with him as he jokes in sexist ways. There's a bizarrely overly dramatic court scene, way more dramatic than the later court scene where he's actually fighting to stay out of prison. It's like no one in this production actually cared about people liking movies, and basically made a joke out of the idea of people being invested in them. And there's a gay joke.
This marriage broke up because of another woman.
That's right, Your Honor. I don't even know they were seeing each other.
Ha ha, lesbians don't exist. They were just found in fairy tales. This actually seems to be a theme of the movie. We'll come back to that. Despite causing a massive disturbance, Rodney is not found in contempt and apparently wins the proceedings. He then goes to an auction and wins a bidding war for a choice piece of real estate in Utah, in a weird little religious community. The depicted religion is strongly telegraphed as fundamentalist Mormon, with even a routine about Brigham Young, but they decided against explicitly naming it.
Hey, I remember the words of Brigham Young. He said, I don't care how you bring him, but Brigham Young.
This joke feels like a remnant from an early script draft, where they were openly depicting Mormonism, but they must have decided to go in a different direction. Maybe they were afraid of causing offense, which is intriguing in light of the blatantly offensive jokes targeting other people, but maybe they just decided to fictionalize the depicted religion and wouldn't want a specific label. The community in question is probably less about fundamentalist Mormonism and more about a popular American perception of offbeat religious communities, derivative of the Amish. The church featured in the film has recognizable fundamentalist Mormon doctrine, like recognizing plural marriage and forbidding smoking and drinking, but there are also Amish features, like a preference for 19th century clothing and technology.
Is there a time difference between LA and Redwood Springs?
Yeah, about 100 years.
There's also an evil banker in town, because why not? The banker, Gates, has an evil plot to introduce gambling to the area, which he can do using a loophole about his Native American ancestry, in order to build a casino on land that he can prove belonged to his ancestors. I'm sure there's some very nuanced analysis that can be made of this, but I'm honestly ignorant of Native American politics, so I'm just going to declare this racist and move on. In order to acquire the land, he borrows money from the Mafia, who wants some of his casino earnings. When he loses the bidding war with Rodney Dangerfield, Gates winds up in trouble with the mob, and now has to find any means to take the land away from him. In the middle of this campy conflict, Rodney ends up having to get married to the former landowner's 3 wives, who come with the property. Despite bigamy being illegal, this is how the law works in this community. The film tries to make you think that there's a feminist point about these women being abused in an oppressive patriarchal religion, and then they learn they're not property by the end of the film, but the film doesn't commit to telling the story. Fury Road, this is not. Rodney asks if the women mind, and his friend says that they don't know any better, presenting it as sexy. And this is the framing accepted by the protagonist and the movie until basically the end. This guy, who laughs about sexual harassment, finds out that something that should be depicted as really messed up is taking place in this cult, and he just doesn't care. The Invention of Lying has a similar joke, where the protagonist follows his drunk friend's advice to use his unique ability to tell falsehoods to get laid. The joke plays out, but then he realizes that what he's doing is really messed up, stops, sends the woman away, and then totally abandons the concept for the rest of the movie. Rodney Dangerfield might sort of recognize that it's messed up, but doesn't let it slow him down, and just focuses on how he didn't want to be married to 3 individual women, and now he's married to 3 at once. Oh no! It's especially cringeworthy in light of the sex abuse scandals surrounding the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, FLDS church leader Warren Jeffs, promoted a system of abusive polygamy in which teenage girls were forcibly married to adult men. In 2005, Jeffs would be put on America's Most Wanted for doing what My Five Wives depicts as a lighthearted sexual fantasy, enabling Rodney Dangerfield as an old man to sleep with attractive young women whose youth and ignorance are emphasized as part of the appeal.
He's like old.
Though I have some issues with the LDS's negative stance on LGBT issues and polyandry, that's one woman marrying multiple men, I would like to emphasize that I don't equate Jeff's criminality with all of Mormonism. The actions of individual criminals within the Mormon community do not imbue the whole of the community with their criminality. Mormon polygamy can be wholesome, as is depicted in the reality show Sister Wives. My issue is with My Five Wives glorifying the specific actions of a criminal minority.
He can leave all his possessions, including his wives, to whomever he wants.
Ooh, how do the women feel about that?
It's the way they were brought up. They don't know any other way.
That's the grin of a serial rapist. The wives are completely indistinguishable from each other. The film doesn't even make them fulfill specific fantasy tropes. They're just interchangeable hot women. And they're bizarrely into Rodney Dangerfield, whose biggest problem now is having to sexually please 3 different women. The framing of Rodney sleeping with his 3 wives inconsistently depicts the wives as having an undue amount of control in the relationship. Despite the women being forced into marriage by an outdated patriarchal religion, having to serve a much older man out of ignorance of a better life, which was presented earlier as a male sex fantasy, the joke now is that the women demand sex, and that he is distressed by having to push himself to his limits, which is hard for an old guy.
I'm envious of a stiff wind.
This undermines the narrative holding the women as abused, while he effectively rapes them, and creates humor from the idea of him being effectively raped. I imagine what they were going for was to have him continuously kept off balance, to maintain a humorous atmosphere, but it's just conceptually awkward and socially problematic for its positive depictions of abuse on both sides of the equation. The first episode of Big Love tried to do something similar, but put in the work to make the 3 wives 3 whole separate characters, and made Bill's issue more of a relatable character trait about having to maintain the image as a strong, virile head of the household, so you would actually care about all of these people in their drama. Also, Bill is actually attractive. He has a likable personality in addition to his movie star looks. Rodney Dangerfield goes to no effort to make himself attractive, and just puts forward this sexual fantasy about getting to sleep with 3 hot women, which then transforms into a mishandled depiction of them abusing him with no understanding of male sexual vulnerability. Caddyshack handles this better by making his character a fun, rebellious figure, challenging the stifling elitism of the country club setting. He brings a party atmosphere where one is sorely desired, and uplifts the common man. The audience surrogates are in the servants to whom he shows respect. You could actually believe that 3 women would want to sleep with him. Not so with Monty Peterson. Under the instruction of the Mafia, Gates tries to steal a plot of land through murdering someone. It's a little unclear if he killed the landowner, or just tries to take advantage of the death. Either way, sketchy. The landowner's 2 wives can't afford the land, but one of them has a sister married to Rodney Dangerfield, and gets him to agree to marry her. He agrees because he wants 1 wife for each season. Gross. And then backs out when he finds out that he has to marry 2 women. So basically he doesn't care about them at all, and was only interested in having a set of 4. He's already having trouble satisfying the 3 he has. So what, 4 is fine, but 5 is too many? It makes no sense. The women cry in a way aggravatingly stereotypical. They should be seriously crying from severe trauma because they're going to be on the streets after the death of their husband. But the way they cry is annoying and whiny. At first I thought this was telegraphing that they're trying to manipulate him, but the context of the scene shows that they are just crying because of their circumstances. They're not even paying attention to Rodney. That makes it seem like the filmmakers just think that this is what women crying is like. Annoying whining that men can take pity on. It illustrates the misogynistic framing of the whole film, where marriage is not seen as about romance or actually caring about each other, but instead about men doing things for whiny women while expecting services. The way that these women persuade Rodney to marry them is by showing that they can cook well, unlike his existing wives. That's all it is, about service to the man with the money. Which raises the question, Why doesn't he just hire them as live-in help? Does he really need to marry them? The movie says yes. The wives are still pretty interchangeable, but now we have two clear groups. The first three are blondes, and the new two are brunettes. There is an illustration of stereotypes where the blondes are sexually passive and the brunettes are sexually assertive. I suspect the reason for this is about white Gentile stereotypes versus Jewish stereotypes. If I'm right, this represents an intersection between misogyny and anti-Semitism. Now worried about his safety, Gates sends his lackey, Stuart, to try to dig up dirt on Rodney Dangerfield, in the hopes that he could be excommunicated and thereby lose his land. The first thing you notice about Stuart is that he's really fat. While this certainly is used as a character shtick, it is actually one of the best depictions of a fat character I've ever seen. He's just a sweetheart, and you want to see him succeed outside of the employ of the bad guy. It might just be an example of lazy writing, where after adding a fat guy to the narrative, they don't do anything with him being fat, but it works to feminist effect for the respect he receives while being much fatter than respected fat characters usually are. For instance, Samwise Gamgee. Sean Astin had to gain 30 pounds, but he's not visibly fat in the way that Stuart is fat. Stuart tries to take a Polaroid of Rodney sneaking a drink and smoke, but he accidentally barges in on some other guy who says that it'll shove the camera up his hiney, and literally does. Great, another use of sexual abuse as a joke. He also takes a picture of Rodney in his Speedo, which he considers obscene, but it just results in the two baddies being mistaken for gay. And we're supposed to laugh because homophobia is so funny. Also, Rodney dresses the wives in skimpy bathing suits, and has them display their bodies as part of a male fantasy, even though they're supposed to be brainwashed into this conservative religion. Yeah, they accepted that a little easily, didn't they? Speaking of homophobia being funny, Rodney decides to take his wives on a vacation to Las Vegas, presumably because the crew wanted to see Siegfried and Roy, where they sit in on a feminist conference, or rather, a feminist conference, with huge finger quotes. It's not feminism so much as a weird distortion of feminism, as seen through the misogynistic male gaze. The feminist speaker is named Dr. Van Dyke, using a homophobic slur to characterize her as a feminist as a lesbian. Sort of. I'll get to that. It's a degrading way to other her that demonizes lesbians and urges the audience to laugh at the very idea of them. As sexist men can't imagine a subject that's not about men, her brand of feminism is all about men. She doesn't talk about women struggling to succeed in a hostile work environment and cultural misogyny like every real feminist speaker I've seen. Instead, she talks about men. Men, men, men. And as she isn't a subordinate wifely type, she must be some kind of warmonger, teaching women to unfairly hate men, not have sex with them, and, metaphorically, kick them in the balls.
Kick him where it hurts!
She preaches feminism in another display of annoying whininess. Like, every attempt is made to make her sound unpleasant and just grating. They even throw in the frickin' Nazi salute. This is how the filmmakers think of women expressing anything that isn't about serving men. And uh-oh, the subordinate wives are being corrupted and will learn to hate men. This is exactly like anti-suffragette propaganda. You insufferable jackasses. Van Dyke and Rodney end up in an elevator together. It's as awkward as you'd expect. He disrespects a woman in front of her, and she rambles a feminist rant. While obnoxiously whiny, she ends with some statements that are fairly on point about men needing to respect women's intellects, and the movie frames it as an important lesson for him to learn. However, it doesn't follow from his flaws, and is not a decent catalyst to redeem him, because it's never emphasized that his sexual harassment and marital rape are bad things. All he does now is try to respect his wives' minds, while continuing to perpetuate the oppressive patriarchal marriage construct. And the only reason that he's motivated to show them any kind of respect now is because feminism leads them to withhold sex, which he was complaining about having to do earlier. He reads the Feminist book to relate to them, which supposedly makes him enlightened. The film frames it as like a character growth moment, and he has a sentimental scene with his wives, who are now traditionally sexy as a confused illustration of their expanding viewpoints. But he doesn't demonstrate the love and respect that the film frames him as having. The scene might as well be about him praising a pet, except that a pet would probably receive more respect.
What if I took a human and trained her as my pet?
No. Gates finally finds the successful tactic of giving Rodney counterfeit bills, letting him spin them around town, and then getting the community to condemn him. The police jail him, and the now progressive wives barge their way in to see him, despite some sexist rule forbidding women from entering. Yay, feminism. The trial at the beginning, that if anything should be goofy, is played as bizarrely dramatic, and the trial that should be dramatic is bizarrely goofy, with the recurring waiter character serving as the public defender. And because he's a waiter, he has to do waiter things as a lawyer, like pouring people drinks. Whatever. Because a successful lawyer can never have another job, he loses the case. The mobsters arrive in town to either collect from Gates or kill him. The lackey is illustrated as a bad guy by sexually harassing women around town in the exact same way that Rodney does, when it's endearing. But this guy does it with an Italian accent, so that makes it bad. They tell Gates to kill Rodney, but Gates has to gloat to him first.
I wanted to take this time to explain my evil plan.
However, Feminist warmongering allows the wives to rescue Rodney in a big stunt with a garbage truck, leading to a wacky chase scene between Rodney and the police, including such comedic gems as naming Chinese food. Empowered feminist wives distracting a man by flashing him, and Mario Kart-style banana peels. They split up, the wives going to get proof of Rodney's innocence, Rodney waiting at the hiding place. When the mobsters show up to kill Rodney, he leads them on a ski chase. Let's just say it's no Spy Who Loved Me. It ends with a homophobic gag. There's an awkward climax where the wives expose Gates, and the mob boss turns out to be Rodney's friend, just coming out of nowhere. Because the wives are now progressive, feminist women, they all decide to divorce him, returning to the status quo. Now 8 wives down, he goes in search of Ms. Right, and ends up marrying Dr. Van Dyke because he's able to convince her that he's a feminist. Yeah. The film homophobically frames lesbianism as not really a thing. Gay jokes are thrown out based on a conceptual framework holding gay people as hypothetical, and now someone strongly telegraphed as a lesbian, with the name Van Dyke, is indicated to be convertible by a talented man. It further plays into the sexist taming of the shrew trope, saying that strong women are just in search of super strong men who can dominate them.
I'd like to see the male who could dominate me.
Perhaps that's exactly what you'd like. Secretly.
What an ugly ending. What an ugly movie. There are so few shows that portray polyamory in any kind of positive way, so the relatively neutral portrayal in My 5 Wives makes me want to like it, if only as a so bad it's good movie. Unfortunately, I can't ignore the awful sexism that this movie displays. It frames women in a condescending, sexually objectifying way with no room for respecting their autonomy. Even the concept of lesbianism, which should be all about women, is restricted into the narrow gaze of how women affect men. The whole framing is about men using women as a resource, with a few references to loving relationships hollow, and merely going through the motions, while viewing women as emotionally immature servants. It shows no respect for the seriousness of the manipulative situation it depicts, for the characters, or for the audience.
No respect at all, are you kidding?
Please like, share, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, and send me an email if you want to commission a video review, and click the link below to support me on Patreon. Pledges of $5 or more will earn you a special thank you at the end of each video. Thank you, and please check out my related videos.